Good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder and this is BRN Weekly for Saturday, January 2nd, 2021. And our top story this week, red tape and confusion block homeless aid. Joining me now to discuss this and a lot more are Natalie Walters and Shayna Montanari from the Howard Center for Investigative Reporting. Ladies, Happy New Year and thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
Thank you. Great to see you both. Natalie, welcome back to the program. Shayna, let's start with you because you and Natalie did a tremendous amount of investigative reporting into COVID relief as it relates to homelessness. And it sounds like the money didn't get allocated to where it needed to be.
Right. Yeah. When the CARES Act came out and was signed into law in March, it was at the end of March, at the beginning of the pandemic, it actually included $4 billion for homeless assistance grants, which is a record number. It usually every year that grant that we wrote about, it's called the Emergency Solutions Grant, is normally a little under 300 million. So this was a big boon for many communities. And so, to deal with the pandemic, but there were a lot of issues that came up with the pandemic of new things that communities needed to keep people experiencing homelessness safe. And they weren't necessarily able to do them that quickly with this new funding, which is what we were investigating.
Right. And so just to kind of circle back on this, I mean, we saw the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program. Some of those funds got allocated, maybe didn't go to the right place. And it sounds like what you're describing of what I read in the article and the piece you all did for the AP and the USA Today is that the money just hasn't found its way to shelters or actually to relieve some of the homelessness that are under considerable pressure today.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is, every community around the country will get this grant by a formula, so they don't have to apply for it necessarily. States and counties and cities, they'll get it from the government, but then it's up to these places to sort of trigger it and get it out to their communities, which is what we investigated and saw that in some places it hasn't happened yet, and now it's winter.
Yeah. I mean, I'm here in Charlotte, North Carolina, not actually far from Natalie, a little far, but not too far from Natalie, and I've seen some tent cities pop up. Natalie, I want to come to you because you and Shayna both did extensive reporting on this. How pervasive is this when you look at the different counties around the U.S.? I think there were some 200 or 300 counties. I mean, is it in certain parts of the country? Because as Shayna said, it's getting cool outside, very cold in some parts of this country, and that means that people are going to be cold as well as not well off as it comes to their finances.
So we looked into, there's about 400 localities that receive this funding. And when we did some data work and looked into it, there are still counties that haven't received any of this money. I think we found 37 counties who hadn't yet accessed any of this money that was originally announced in March and, was supposed to help them through COVID. And now we're in December and they haven't been able to use it. And fewer than half of the eligible 362 localities had accessed all of the funding. So, there may be some who have been able to access, 10, 20% of the funding, but haven't been able to access any of it. And it was interesting because I'm in my hometown, Augusta, and this is actually one of the places that hasn't yet been able to access funding. And so what's happened in places like that is they've had to rely heavily on local nonprofits. For Augusta, that's been the Salvation Army. And so that's sort of put a weight on their finances. And now, they're having to sort of support the homeless community in Augusta. And they haven't, been trained to do that. They don't have necessarily the funds to do that. So they are hoping that when the money does eventually come in, Augusta will be able to sort of reimburse the Salvation Army for sort of keeping the community afloat the past 9 months while they wait to be able to access the funds.
But I guess it just, from the outside looking in, so you've got this money that's allocated. Why is there a struggle? I mean, is it like a Rubik's Cube or some other game that you have to play in order to get access to the funding? Are people not pulling the levels of political levers, appropriately within some of these communities? Is there any rhyme or reason as to why?
Yes. Right. So one of the main reasons that people are having trouble accessing it is that, this typically, the federal government does give funds each year to aid the homeless, and it's called the ESG program. So this year they had that same program, except it was about 14 times the normal amount of money to help people with COVID. And so because it's sort of a different year, HUD said we're also going to release some special guidelines that might give you more flexibility this year because it's more money and it's a unique year. But, those guidelines didn't come out until September. So, a lot of localities said we don't want to spend this money yet because what if there's some special allowances and then we wish we had done that. So they had to wait. And so then it didn't come till September. Well, then by September, it's already starting to get cold in some places. And then by the time, once they got those guidelines, then you have to figure out, well, what do we want to do with it? And, plans like that take a lot of time and research and hundreds of pages of written notes. And then once they have that plan, they have to submit it to HUD and get approval. So you can see why it's taken a while for places. It's mainly waiting on HUD to release those guidelines. And then, it usually takes maybe a month or so to come up with a plan, write it out and submit it. And then they need approval.
Yeah, and a lot of people really, as we get into these cold months, don't have the time. I mean, there are people outside, as we talked about, freezing or getting near freezing temperatures. Shayna, what is it going to take? We're in 2021, so we just started the new year. I mean, are there ways to streamline this process to get the relief pushed down to those local governments so that they can access it? Because there's no plan that's ever perfect, right? And so we don't want to have paralysis by analysis. But is there a way to really streamline this and make this work for everybody?
Right. I think when you say paralysis by analysis is kind of what happened, I think, in a lot of places, because this is normally a relatively small grant program, and there's not that many people in each community who are responsible for managing the grant. Sometimes one person who has other jobs. And so when they're faced with now this record amount of money that they have to deal with new restrictions and guidelines that in some cases help them be more flexible, but are new. So you need to think about it a little bit more about what you're going to do with the funding. I think that did slow some people down. And, communities, many communities did have access to the coronavirus relief fund that was expiring. So they wanted to use that first, but that was for everything. That was for all sorts of assistance, not just homelessness. And this is specifically for homelessness. So, this is important for a lot of communities because they needed to space out their shelters, for example, with COVID spread in communal environments. Many homeless shelters are group shelters, which is not ideal. So they really needed the time. And, communities really need to just trigger the money from HUD and get the plan rolling. They do have until 2022 to use this record amount of money. So it's not too late. So that's good. So we're hoping that, drawing attention to the issue will hopefully get things rolling a little bit and get things moving. Because this is going to be going on, as we know, for another year. Yeah,
absolutely. Natalie, I guess last question here. This is, and this is by far, we're not doing this topic justice on the show with just 10 minutes, and I understand that. But like you said, Shayna, if we can just raise awareness, it's great. But Natalie, this has put a lot of strain on those charities, those not-for-profits, those 501c3s that are trying to be part of the system. So usually there's a government component of this that helps certain types of people, and then there's charities that are set up to do that. This has really put a lot of strain on those charities, hasn't it?
Absolutely. Yes. We talked to a number of places who said, we are the only people here right now to take care of these people. And not only that, but, charities, I think I've talked on the show before, they're under strain right now because donations have dropped off as, people are under financial strain this year. And, another huge struggle is that charities no longer have as many volunteers because obviously people need to be worried about safety. So a lot of the places we talked to said, we used to rely on a church to provide a shelter, and, we relied on volunteers to help with food. But this year, some charities don't have any volunteers. We talked to some people in Oregon who said they used to rely on one shelter exclusively run by volunteers, but now that place said they sent out a survey saying, how many of you would be willing to come back this year? And I think it was something like 96% said they wouldn't be able to, which is understandable. But, it just means that, this has been a hard year for charities and for nonprofits. And, we need them now more than ever, but they have less resources now than ever to help people. So it's definitely been a struggle. And, Shane and I definitely have so much admiration for all the people we talk to that are sort of carrying this huge weight on their shoulders and doing it with a smile. And, it's not like they get paid a ton, but they just really care about people and, want to see people in housing, because once you're housed, as we talk about in the article, then you can worry about other things like finding a job and, getting a good night's sleep. It's hard to care about those things when you don't have a roof over your head.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I mean, that's where this social safety net, this is who it's intended for, to help people when they really need it. Well, we're going to have to leave it there, unfortunately. Shayna, Natalie, great to see you as always. Wishing you a very prosperous and healthy new year. And we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Thanks for letting us discuss this.
Well, thanks again, ladies. Happy New Year to you. And when we come back, we'll take a look at our best segments for the week. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN Weekly. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms? Especially for the smaller businesses. I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Hi folks, Joe Namath here, and if you're on Medicare, this is important. You're now entitled to eliminate copays and get dental care, dentures, eyeglasses, prescription coverage, in-home aids, unlimited transportation, and home-delivered meals, all at no additional cost. Plus, your zip code may have coverage with the Give Back benefit that adds money back to your Social Security check every month. Look, with the uncertainty of the virus and vaccines, you need to get everything you're entitled to. Here's the bottom line. Call to get significant benefits at no additional cost and see if your zip code has coverage with the Give Back benefit. Millions of people have trusted the Medicare Coverage Helpline. You can too. Call now. It's free.
Call 1-800-924-3920. That's 1-800-924-3920.
Welcome back. On Monday, I sat down with Fund Intelligence's Randy Plavica to discuss new retirement opportunities in 2021.
I think the overarching theme that I've heard is that the defined contribution space is going to look more like the defined benefit or pension space as we would otherwise know it. And it's happening through a few different ways and a few different means. But, the overarching theme is that retirement providers right now are looking to regain their hold on being the whole package supplier. They want to be with people from the day they start investing in retirement until the day they either A, enroll out of their plan, or B, stick with it into retirement and start generating some income. It's a really interesting facet in that, we can start combining financial wellness with a traditional retirement plan. bringing in healthcare benefits or healthcare savings more so, bringing in college savings, debt, elimination, debt reduction, and all of a sudden the retirement savings landscape is going to start to just look like the savings landscape overall with a pretty big retirement lens on it. But that seems to be kind of the general theme pushing through. There's obviously some interest around private equity, private alternatives, and other stuff I'd happy to dive into. But of course, the DC to DB trend seems to be the most prominent here. We actually have a few key providers that are already launching into that space. I think one of the very first ones to move on it was Voya and Aon back, probably about mid-year. And they were like, we're going to have a PEP on Jan 1. And all of a sudden, all these firms, a lot of record keepers were like, we're going to have a PEP as well. The means by which they achieve that obviously are still to be revealed. But I think so far, by my count, we have at least a half dozen major launches. And I'm sure we're going to have plenty more. Now, when I talk to the actual people, as far as it goes, as to supplying the PEPs or basically running the PEPs, they have a lot of hope for it in the small to micro plan space. They also have a lot of hope for it in the mega plan space, i.e., taking a bunch of large plans and making them into one mega plan, whether you're grouping them by industry or grouping them by saver type. I think all of a sudden you can really, almost categorize your audiences into one PEP if you so choose, and service them very efficiently without needing to have a super broad workforce to address every single plan on an individual basis. Granted, they still want to do that, but the PEP creates a means of efficiency to achieve that. Yeah, I think when I've spoken to some of the retirement firms that really work closely with our legislative bodies, there's an appetite for Secure 2.0. Obviously, the best time to strike is when the iron is hot, and with Secure already passed, I think Secure 2.0 is not too far off the horizon in terms of being introduced, sharpened up and the like. As far as like where record keeper and provider attention goes, I do think that Secure will re-enter the focus and the frame here. A lot of firms obviously went into survival mode in March and April, and they just wanted to get by, retain the assets of investors, make sure investors' money was safe, whether it was in a 401k or wherever else, IRA, et cetera. They wanted to make sure that everybody's investments were intact and protected. And I think now that we're having some clarity and we're having a little bit of a rebound here, especially with the vaccines starting to be distributed, I think they're going to reframe the conversations in the new year, maybe in the latter half more so, to be about the Secure Act, all the efficiencies it brought, and the new opportunities for retirement investors themselves, right? All of a sudden we can have in-plan income. And I would estimate that those conversations would likely be focused on the volatility we saw in 2020 here. Yeah, I think I can't escape a conversation in industry without talking about retirement income, and that's a good thing. The fact that it's on so many asset managers and mutual fund families' minds is a good thing for Americans and retirement investors overall, because it means that now the people that are supplying your investment products really want to build it in. Like I said, I've seen a couple different ways in which they want to achieve this. Like I said, bringing in an annuity is definitely one avenue, but some have even talked about just building a whole tier into the target date fund that is just purely based around income. There's a few providers that already have income capabilities built into their offerings, Prudential, DFA, and a few other key players, but it's not gotten widespread integration yet, too. Part of it is because somebody's probably waiting for a big player to jump and then they'll follow suit, or vice versa. Somebody's waiting for an innovator to come disrupt the space, either a boutique retirement firm or maybe a mid-sized player. And then everybody will put their feelers in the water and either jump into the deep end or wade into the shallow end. It just all depends, I guess, on who gets there first and who does it well first, more so than just who's the first one to be in the space. I think it's always ever pressing. It's always in the peripheral vision, right? When it comes into the forefront and when it's in your right in front of you and there's a lawsuit in hand, that's obviously when you're not having as much fun as a firm or as an investor. But I think fee pressure and fee concern is always top of mind. What makes it interesting right now is obviously firms starting to look into new asset classes that maybe have a higher price tag, and they're trying to justify, does it make sense to bring this unique asset class into the target date mix or into the retirement plan mix at the expense of the cost, which obviously gets handed on to the investor. Figuring out how they absorb that cost is ultimately going to be, what determines how much litigation they face in the future. If they absorb it themselves and they handle it, I think they're fine. I think if they start, getting into really high price asset classes and, forcing that onto the investor without much consultation of the advisor or the sponsor beforehand, I think that's when we'll get to all the red tape, and they'll be having more fun in court than they will be running money for clients. All year long, I've heard about people talking about, we're going to upgrade our tech, And when I hear that talk, usually it's like, oh, we're going to enhance our client-facing portal. We're going to advance the software that our advisors are using. I'm of the view that I really think it needs to be on cybersecurity at this point. And firms almost need to undertake it themselves to bring their cybersecurity up to speed, right? We can't always count on the U.S. government to know how investment management software works to the point of doing cybersecurity for it. I'm sure they could incentivize and subsidize it in some way if they so chose to do so. But I think ultimately, the not to say the burden of it, but really the responsibility of it is going to fall on actual fund providers and people that are, maintaining assets for clients, right? At the end of the day, it's your job to make sure that money is safe, whether it's from markets or from cyber attacks. There's two different beasts that you could be staring down this year. And I don't doubt that, we're going to see more third-party players coming in and offering, improved cybersecurity. If it's built out within that firm probably has a hotshot tech department that can do the firewall and all the necessary protections needed. But I think as of right now, we've seen systems created that have been super efficient and then they still get hacked. And it's at this point, it's like, well, what are we going to do to change that? We really need to disrupt what's disrupting us, which sounds kind of counterintuitive, or not counterintuitive, but almost sounds, a little bit ironic. But at this point, cybersecurity is top of mind for a lot of these firms. It's just a matter of investing in it and actually putting their money where their mouth is when it comes to defending clients' assets.
And on Wednesday, I sat down with State Farm's Ashley King to discuss what you need to know when purchasing auto insurance. Let's take a look.
It's a great thing to review every so often, because what we find is a lot of people, when they set up their insurance, they're at a point in life to where they either, if they're a younger generation, they're just carrying on what mom and dad have, or they haven't reviewed it in a number of years, and life has changed, right? Where life for you has been probably a year, 2, 3 years ago is different than where you're at now. So it's always good to stay on top of your insurance and what your coverages are. So with that, I think it's great for people to, it depends on what they want. Like, there are certain people who are self-sufficient, right? To where they know exactly what they want to do it online. But then there's others to where they want to have a conversation with somebody, to where it all depends on ability only is, okay, would you be comfortable with coming out of a couple of $100s or thousands of dollars to fix your car? Or do you want someone to actually have a conversation with you, get to know your needs, and make recommendations to say, hey, this is what, after having a conversation with you, this is what I would recommend for your situation. So it's always great to talk to a couple different places, but then whatever's important to you when choosing an insurance company, go down that route. Like, for me, I would want that relationship versus having to call a 1-800 number and sit on hold for 30 minutes at a time. I mean, that's a big impact, especially when you need us, right? Your insurance is only important when you need it. And when you get into an accident, that's our time to shine as your insurance company. Absolutely. Yep. So that State Farm has, it's called our Drive Safe and Save program, for exactly that. The safer you are as a driver, the better the rates, or the larger the discount that you'll receive, right? And it allows you to tailor what your insurance rates are based on your driving habits. So that's individual based on you versus the masses of a lot of the insurance rates are factored on where you live, the number of accidents, the type of car that you drive. But with the safe driving programs, that is individualized discount made just for you, which is pretty cool. It brings awareness, right? To where if I know that my discount, right, or what I'm going to pay every single month is based on my driving habits, I'm going to be more aware of how sharp I take right turns, how sharp I take left turns, my acceleration, so on and so forth. And that's what many of our customers have said, that it truly brings me awareness to my driving habits. And with you saying your wife being the safer driver, like, that's what we hear all the time. Like, oh man, I won't let my spouse drive because they're not as safe as a driver as I am, so on and so forth. So it's funny, but it allows you to be in control and just makes you brings that awareness to you being a safer driver. So we'll start with financing and leasing. So the big difference that a lot of people is surprised about is that when you lease a car, the leasing company has a minimum requirements on your liability insurance. So if you're at that level, so most leasing companies require your liability to be at $100,000, $300,000 for bodily injury and $100,000 of property damage, where it's fine. And there's not that big of a difference if you're at that level. But if your liability limits are below that, for it to satisfy the lease for you have to increase those liability limits. So I guess that would be the biggest thing. If you're financing it, you can carry whatever liability limits that you choose. Whereas if you're leasing it, you have to meet those requirements right there. Another good thing when you're planning on going out to go buy a new vehicle would be, you are more than welcome. For us, we would do it all the time, to where if you're thinking about going out and buying a vehicle, we'll give you a quote to say, hey, this is, if you choose to get this vehicle, this is what your insurance is going to look like. Because I think that's a little bit sometimes of a shocker for people, where yes, the car payments are one thing, but then how is my insurance going to be impacted by that? And you hit the nail on the head, because the cost of an SUV to fix it is a lot more than a sedan. So that part, I mean, yes, you're safer because you've got more metal around you, but the insurance does tend to change going from a sedan to an SUV. That's correct.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN Weekly. Have a topic of interest or someone you think we should talk to, then drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the information in retirement markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, all in one place, check out today's edition of our newsletter, The Morning Pulse. Don't forget, we're back again tomorrow with members of the media, academia, and financial services as we analyze all the news in the week on the BRN Sunday. So until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Are you being audited and do you owe the IRS $10,000 or more in back taxes? Is the IRS threatening to take more of your money? Don't fight the IRS alone. The Tax Doctor is here to help you negotiate your tax bill and reduce your stress. The IRS can freeze your assets and seize your bank accounts, but you can stop these IRS actions. The Tax Doctor will work with you using our years of experience to represent your case to help you get the best resolution under the IRS guidelines. Help is here to deal with the IRS to reduce your stress. We've handled thousands of cases, so we know what we're doing. If you owe $10,000 or more in back taxes, do not call the IRS alone. Call a Tax Doctor now for a tax emergency analysis.
Call 800-224-6439.